right, and we are up and ready to go. So, thank you, everybody. By the way, you might have seen some awkward pauses right there at the beginning. Bear with us. The technology isn't always our friend. But Aaron, want to get us kicked off, sir?
Thanks, Miles. So, welcome everyone. My name is Aaron Bangor. I'm chair of Disability in Central Texas. So, that is a local affiliate for the Disability in organization. And we serve the Austin area down to San Antonio up to kind of Belton. Um, and we're one of three local affiliates in Texas, the other two being in Greater Houston area, one being in North Texas up in the Metroplex. And there are about 25 local affiliates across the country. Disability In as an organization is focused on increasing disability inclusion in the workplace in all different senses of that. So not just on employment, but in supplier diversity programs, as well as in the marketplace, and as well as how you serve customers. So we do that, but at a local level where we can get together every couple months. We started doing an in-person meetup here in Austin for folks who want to get together face to face. But every other month we do one of these virtual sessions so that we can engage the local area here, but have a presence all across the web to talk about important topics related to disability inclusion. And before we go any further, I wanted to mention we've got a new LinkedIn page. So please, while you're here at LinkedIn, go check that out. Go subscribe to it. Just like they say in the YouTube videos and so forth, that you don't need to like and comment, but if you would go give us a like on that page, that'd be great. So, what is today about? Today we're going to talk about digital accessibility. And for folks that go like, digital topics are a little scary, that's technology, I don't necessarily know how all that works. Rest assured, we're going to be really focusing on what is the value to organizations of any size of digital accessibility, just being aware of that topic and how it fits into a larger disability inclusion strategy for organizations. We're not going to get into talking about code or anything like that, though. If that is something that's a comfort to you, I think this will still be valuable because it really will talk about how do you advance digital accessibility within your organization, regardless of what role you play. So it's an important topic, not just when you think about building websites or mobile apps for customers, but for employees themselves. You probably already have employees with disabilities in your organization, whether that's something you know about or not, whether you have a self-ID program and you have a handle on that or not. But as importantly as supporting your existing employees to thrive and advance in your organization, you want to make sure that you're rolling out a welcome mat for prospective employees so they've got an environment that they see is inclusive of their needs. So we'll be talking about all that today as we get into more with the panel. Just a few other housekeeping items before I turn it over to our moderator, Miles, for today. With the platform, we did get live captions up and running for today. That's something we're working on. But if you're in the Chrome browser, there is a live captions feature you can use that will give you some automated captions. We will be posting clips of today's session, and those will definitely have have the closed captions built into those videos that we'll be sharing out here over the next few weeks. So with that, Miles, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away with our awesome panel we've got set up today.
Well, fantastic, Aaron. Thank you so much. And it is good to see everybody. And I do want to correct Aaron on one thing. Please do on our LinkedIn, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Like, Hey, seriously, like it's all an algorithm thing, right? No, what we want to do with this is ultimately we realize that we have people that are joining us from across the country as well as locally here in Austin. And we really want to create a platform for multiple people that are disability advocates and disability interested within their community to come and get together to network and also to share ideas, to talk. And we're hoping that we can use our LinkedIn page on Disability in Central Texas to kind of help facilitate doing so. And in case you are curious, I'm going to be going to Disability in the large national conference. We're just one of many different groups across the entire country, but that's a really fantastic opportunity for you to go and meet like-minded people like yourselves that are accessibility experts or disability recruiting experts or people that are just community partners that are interested in advancing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. So something that I'm really excited about. But without any further ado, let me introduce myself. I'm Miles. I'm with Peak Performers. For those of you hearing about us for the first time, we are a nonprofit staffing and recruiting agency. And as a nonprofit, we have a mission of setting a higher employment standard for people with disabilities. So specifically, we help people with disabilities find jobs in an office and kind of environment. So we do administrative and up. But if you are a job seeker right now, I would encourage you, go to peakperformance.org, check out all the many jobs that we have. You can upload your resume right there. It takes 2 minutes, so why not? Might as well. And if you are a client looking to hire somebody, because, hey, look, at the end of the day, we're all here to kind of help job seekers and stuff too, but we also need jobs for those job seekers to go to as well. So Peak Performers does interface with a number of different companies and government agencies across the entire country.
Miles, you cut out.
What's that? Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you are...
you cut out for a second there. You're back.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It will do that. It's a lagging issue and stuff, so bear with me. But it should catch up on the other end, and the people seeing it live, you may experience some interruption. Bear with me. But anyway, if you are a business that's interested in hiring, please do connect with Peak Performers as well too. I'm here to be a liaison for you as well. But let's go ahead and dive right into the introductions for the day. First off, we have Erica, who kind of actually gave me the idea for starting this. But Erica Braverman is the UX research lead at Larunda Tech. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan, and a MAT from Wayne State University, and a certificate in user experience research and design from UC San Diego. Her UX research career has focused on the online experiences of participants with disabilities, and she is a passionate advocate for accessibility research environments. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Miles. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah. Now, if you are logged in right now, go check out Erica. She is listed in the event, so make sure that you go connect with her. And by the way, if you are joining us right now and a little bit late to the party, no worries. Drop in your LinkedIn profile into the chat right here. That way, everybody has a chance to connect with each other. Great way to go and meet new people, even in a virtual format. Next up, we have Kathy Keller, the famous Kathy Keller. Kathy Keller stands out as a dedicated advocate for the rights of individuals with disabilities, bringing over 2 decades of experience to the table in the realm of accessibility. Her expertise covers the spectrum from policy formulation to hands-on implementation on accessible technologies. Known for her determination and integrity, Kathy is recognized as an expert in crafting accessible design solutions and advocating for necessary changes. Her approachable demeanor and strategic vision have earned her a reputation as an effective leader and valued team member capable of turning innovative ideas into tangible results. Her commitment to her work is a testament to the qualities that make her a sought-after professional in her field. Kathy, thanks for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Miles.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for making this happen. You and Erica and Aaron, this is a wonderful opportunity for folks to learn about accessibility.
I'm looking forward to it. And then finally, we have Hiram Kirkendall. Over the last quarter century, Hiram has dedicated himself to increasing inclusivity in the digital accessibility space for both the public and private sectors. Over his career, Hiram has overseen the development of some of the most heavily utilized applications in the public sector, in addition to supporting the accessibility needs of organizations ranging from Fortune 500 to small businesses. For the past 14 years, he has increased his scope to include organizational governance, including assisting organizations in creating and implementing actionable policies and procedures. His insights have been featured in publications such as Mealy's Litigation Reports and Banking Law Journal. Furthermore, Hiram gives his time to speak on a variety of accessibility topics. Thank you, Hiram.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to be here. It's a good group.
It is a good group. I'm excited about this. And what makes me so excited is that I am an expert at hiring, recruiting, disability hiring. I know a lot about accommodations, but I know very little about accessibility, specifically digital accessibility. So I'm going to be actually phrasing this whole panel from the perspective of somebody that's kind of new to this topic. And, about the extent of what I know is like, oh, make sure to add alt tags to your images. But that's about the extent to I know. And I'm excited to learn from all of y'all about exactly what this holds. Not only like how to do it, a little bit of that, but also more importantly, like why it should matter to businesses and why everybody should be focused on that. So without any further ado, let's dive right into the first question right there. And Hiram, would you explain what actually is digital accessibility and how does it actually differ from physical adaptations or physical accessibility on the work site?
It's funny because this is actually an important question. The flippant answer, the easy answer is digital accessibility is websites and mobile application, and physical accessibility is curb cutouts and how high are light switches in a room and how much turning radius is there for wheelchairs. But it's actually much deeper than that. We can take a page from our friends at the feds. So they have created a term called Information and Communication Technology, or ICT. And I encourage you to Google that, Information Communication Technology, or just ICT. States have adopted it. They have slightly different terms. You may have heard Electronic Information Resources, EIR, or Electronic Information Technology, EIT. And the reason, and this is important, is in your organization, you will need to define what is digital technology. So when it comes time for procurement and somebody says, well, is this in scope? Do I have to evaluate this in terms of digital accessibility? You'll have something to work with. And so I'm going to actually read the term for ICT because it's long, but I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. So ICT includes information technology and any equipment that is an interconnected system or subsystem or equipment used to create, convert, duplicate, store, or deliver data or information. You're like, oh my gosh, Hiram, that's a terrible way to start your part of the presentation. What does any of that mean? Well, what we're doing is, first of all, they're casting a net. And they're saying if a human interacts with it, it is in scope for digital technology. So then it goes on to do another very important thing. It actually enumerates some of the more difficult pieces. ICT includes telecommunication products such as telephones. Didn't think of telephones as digital technology, but think about it. It's sitting on the desk. It has an interface. It's an electronic interface. Information kiosks, thanks to the Internet of Things and the way technology is proliferating, the kiosks and things that we interact with are now being considered to have digital technology aspects. Transaction machines, websites, multimedia, office equipment, copiers, fax machine. If it has a human interface, it's included. Now, the other reason I encourage you to go look up ICT is that it also starts getting into what they do not believe is information communication technology when it gets into like procurement situations. Now, that's more than we want to get into here, but when you start thinking about policies, for example, if it's a thermostat that the general public's not going to have access to and only somebody inside of maintenance is going to have access to it, do I need to evaluate it the same way that I would a website or to the same degree? So at the heart of this, I would say digital accessibility is anything that has an interface that a human can interact with. I would say digital interface, but I've seen phone systems that had very little digital interfaces and they still count. They're just buttons. So if a human can interact with it, I'm going to put it into that digital space.
Very interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't even have thought about the telephone, but yeah, that totally is a digital piece too. And we really interact with so many different parts and pieces in our world and in our work site that really we have to think about. Like, it's so easy to take sight, for example, for granted, or any other of our abilities. So yeah, any other panelists, like, is there any other kind of things that you like to point out as far as like things that we don't think about that include digital accessibility? Kathy or Erica?
Well, I always like to throw in digital documents and even emails. So my background, I came into digital accessibility with a Spanish degree. So I always like places where I don't need to code anything, although that's wonderful too. But even just the way you send an email can include do-it-yourself digital accessibility or prepare a Word document. So um, it's one of my favorite places to think about digital accessibility, actually.
And Aaron said something that was tremendously powerful at the beginning. It kind of went by quickly, but it's not just things that are your corporation facing out, it's your employees within. We want to minimize barriers within the organization, which makes it easier on HR for hiring and career advancement and enjoyment of use. So Aaron actually packed a lot in that very beginning segment. I'm like, oh, I'm fitting that in somewhere. So here it is.
I like it. I like it. All right. So the next question is for you, Erica. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was hoping that you could expand on this a little bit. And the basic question is, why should businesses care? You know, they've got a lot of things, they've got a lot of expenses. Their goal is to drive profit. And let's also like talk about this not only as a business, but also like a government agency. Let's talk about kind of both those angles. Why should you care? Especially, like, to play devil's advocate, maybe this is only affecting a very small portion of the population that's going to be interfacing with you. So why should businesses care? Well, answer that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, I kind of like to go from the granular out here. So the two big chunks, granular pieces, where digital accessibility can really boost a business is hitting standards like Section 508 compliance, and being ADA compliant through the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which, if that's a new term for you, that's a set of guidelines not really tied to any country or locale, but just a way we measure the accessibility of a digital tool. Um, and that can help you get certain contracts. If you want government contracts, you need to look into Section 508 compliance. Your local business community might have certain priorities that they'll offer benefits to people who are making their digital spaces accessible to companies and organizations. So that can really bring you some advantages. But then also, you're going to have far improved customer experience and customer reach. And I always like to encourage people to think beyond, maybe just that small portion mentality, because the truth is, a lot of people might not necessarily think of themselves as having a disability, but per the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they do. People who are colorblind, people who have dyslexia, and then people who have age-related disabilities, people who are proficient tech users, which we have more and more people aging who grew up with more technology. They like to shop online. They like to communicate via email, but their vision, their hearing, their cognition, and their mobility is changing. So you want to make sure that you're reaching those customers. And then as you go inward, getting back to what Aaron said and what Hiram pointed out, if your processes, if the technologies that you're using are accessible, that's going to benefit your team. You're going to put together a better employee experience. And companies with better employee experiences get better employees. You're going to be able to hire that rock star talent you want, because you're removing barriers that are stopping them from being your star employees. So you're going to have a better team experience, better employee experience, in addition to that, better customer experience. And finally, I think there's a real benefit to companies who are taking the steps to becoming accessible, to making that a part of the company story. That could be something that really sets you apart from your competitors. If you say, hey, guess what we're doing? We want to be inclusive. We want to put together a great experience for everyone. This is who we are. This is part of our corporate social responsibility. This is something we really care about a lot. That can really resonate with your customers. And that can really put you out there as a caring company. So a lot of benefits to digital accessibility beyond just that the little sliver. I mean, you're gonna have more impact than you think. This is how I like to see it.
I love that. Yeah, if we think about these things as only affecting a very small portion of people, but if you start adding up all the small pieces, you have a big slice of pie here. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is a lot of people that are affected. And I think that most people are probably afraid to say something. I mean, if I'm projecting a little bit right there, but I think a little bit like Kathy, is that kind of what your experience has been too, that people might be afraid to say something when they have a bad experience on your website or a bad experience with your technology?
Oh, I agree completely. In fact, what they do is leave. They go somewhere else. They go to the competition. They find information that they can access. And I like to repeat what Hiram loves to say, which is that the baby boomer generation are well financed. They spend money. So if you have a business and a web presence, then you definitely want to be accessible to the people who are aging and out there spending their money.
Thank you very much. And Kathy, this next question is for you. So I think that a lot of the conversation around digital accessibility is specifically focused around websites and specifically for people with visual disabilities. Some of the people in our audience may have heard of JAWS before. JAWS is a software application that will read aloud a website or, frankly, for that matter, anything on your computer to you so that you can experience it as a blind user. But I think it's important to point out that there are probably a lot of other adaptations and accommodations and accessibility considerations to take into account. Is that correct?
Oh, your sound just went out again. I'm sorry, I missed the end of what you were
Oh,
saying.
no, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, there was a bit of a lag there for a second. I was hoping that you could be able to talk a little bit more about some of the other adaptations made for a range of other disabilities too.
Sure, absolutely. So when we're talking, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's important when you're creating web content that, like Erica mentioned, that you use the web standards and you create things in a way so that assistive technology can use it, can access it. Miles, you mentioned alternative text for images. Very important because, as you said, a screen reader is going to read what's on the screen, but it's actually reading the code. It's not reading what we see, it's reading the code that creates that in the background. So it's looking for alternative text. Using linked text that makes sense is important because if the screen reader is reading out a URL, that's not telling someone much. But if that's actually what's at the URL and it's a link, that makes more sense. Everyone's familiar with captions, right, for hearing impaired. But if you think about it, a lot of these things that we do for people with disabilities to make things accessible actually makes things better for everyone. Because if you're in a waiting room, for instance, a lot of times they don't have the sound on the television, just the captions, and you can read it. Or in airports, any noisy environment. Another thing you can consider doing when you're building web content is think about people who have low vision and who need good color contrast. A lot of the websites that I see that are very modern today, contemporary looking websites, they use very thin, small text, and it's difficult to read. As you get older, it gets even more difficult to read. So There are a lot of things you can do to make your site more accessible to everyone. I would also say consider not having a lot of moving objects, or if it's moving, give the user a way to stop that, to turn it off, because moving objects are difficult for some people with different types of disabilities, especially cognitive disabilities. Consider using white space. Don't just pile too much on the page. Make it easy for everybody to find what they're looking for. There are a lot of different things, techniques that we have for building things in a way that make it easier for people to consume. And I would just repeat that if you do this using web standards, it's going to make it better for everyone. Those digital curb cuts, so to speak, make it better for everyone. Tara, you want to add to that, or Erica?
Well, one of the things that I like is, and you said it, that when changes that were created, maybe not necessarily for accessibility, but help everybody. For example, responsive design is an amazing feature that it helps everybody. You also have to think about the non-digital technologies, like your interactive voice response system. If you've never had somebody who's deaf go through and try to use a relay service to go through your system, it's just amazing, the information you get and focus indication. And so the only other thing that I would slap in here, and then Eric, I'll turn it over to you, is that just to go a little nerdy, I think we are seeing some enhancements overall in the technical accessibility space through better frameworks like React and Angular and Bootstrap. They used to be, these days our developers are almost what we call integrators. They take parts and put it together. They're not really coding things from scratch. And so, if you're using a Shopify or a Squareface or Wix or WooCommerce, you really need to be careful and ensure those frameworks are doing those things that Kathy said. A little off topic, but there we go.
I like
Kathy, I love how you mentioned that people without disabilities use these features and benefit from them, things like captions. And that kind of goes back to, I think, just that general overall good experience that eliminates frustrations in general when people are using your products and your tools. So I'm really glad you said that, because that's I think one of the hidden benefits of this that people don't necessarily think about.
So we all in Central Texas recently experienced, a total eclipse, and that was pretty cool. And I don't know about y'all, but I tried to save my eyeballs, and I wore a pair of those special sunglasses to be able to look at the sun. And a lot of times when we talk about accommodations or accessibility, it's actually a lot cheaper and easier than you may think it is. For example, those things right there, that was created so that millions of humans could stare at the sun, and per cost, they cost maybe 5 cents to produce or something. But a lot of times, if we think about that and we think about accessibility as a way of adaptation for to include our entire species, I think that kind of broadens out the net a little bit more, so that all of us can really kind of experience the same thing. And that's really important too, so that we all have those shared events. But I actually want to kind of take that back, and let's use our empathy hat a little bit here. So Erica, kind of describe to me some of the most common barriers that people with disabilities may face when interacting with your company's website.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question, because this pushed me to revisit a resource that I really find to be interesting, and I'm going to share it with you so you can explore it for yourself. It's called the WebAIM Million. So WebAIM, AIM Million. And this is an annual project that looks at 1 million of the most commonly visited websites on the internet, and it takes a look at their accessibility. So I'm going to really pull from the 2024 report here. So I kind of have a canned answer. But this is very accurate across the board what they've discovered. They are going through 1 million websites, so they have a big reach here. What Kathy mentioned with the low contrast of text against background, believe it or not, 80% of the homepages that WebAIM looked at in this study have poor contrast. And that's something that can be fixable very simply in the website CSS, or if you're just using a color preference selector, if you're using a CMS tool, that can be repaired very easily. And WebAIM also has a little tool that can help you check your colors, your text and background. So definitely take advantage of that. Missing alternative text, which is a short text description that goes with an image. It gets read by screen readers, like the JAWS tool that Miles was talking about. Missing form labels, making sure that your forms are correctly labeled, first name, last name, email address, things like that. Empty links, empty buttons. Make sure that you're sweeping the dust off your page, getting rid of things you don't need. Missing document language, that tells the screen reader what language the website is in, so it will read it. And the nice thing about this, if you're thinking, oh no, well, what? I wonder if my website's doing all those things. It's not a nice thing that all these websites have problems, but the nice thing about these particular problems is that many of them are very easily correctable, even if, like me, you have a Spanish degree and you're not coming from a computer science background. So take a look at what your website can do, how you can change the colors, what you can do to add alternative text, and start to put those things into place.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Kathy or Hiram, anything to add to that?
I could just repeat something Erica said about the WebAIM tool for testing your website. It's free. It's called Wave, and you can put a URL in it, and it'll show you immediately with an automated test some of the things that need to be looked at. Now, everything can't be tested automatically. It takes a human being to actually make sure that everything is accessible, but the automated tool can do a lot, and you can make a lot of progress by using it, and it's free.
But there are two, we, as a company that does audits, we frequently have to work on people that are going through litigation. And I will tell you that it is still level A things that are getting cited in there. So focus indication is you start tabbing through a web page, you should know where you are when you go through there. If you have a mobility impairment, you are not using a mouse, and so you need focus indication. That's very hard for automated tools to detect. Keyboard, there's simply things on the page that have been marked up in a way that a keyboard, you can't tab and access it and use a keyboard. You're strictly used to a mouse. So, in addition to the things on the WebAIM Million, there are a lot of things that they're not even they're going to be able to test for. And that's where it's just absolutely essential you do manual testing in addition to automated testing.
Yeah, I think it's important. And you're both absolutely right. With the WebAIM, and there are other wonderful tools out there. And then it's so critical to have an audit, a human person come in and take a look. I think what someone told me that those tools they capture about 30% of the errors, but they get the biggies. So you could definitely use a combination there if you're sitting there, if you happen to have popped up the WebAIM page while we're chatting. But I think it's important to kind of sum it up in what these tools can and can't do. They can help you find the really big things, so Hiram doesn't have to say to people for the 1,000th time, check your color contrast, because that's very easy to find on a tool. But then things like what you said about the keyboard navigation and the focus to tell people where they are as they navigate, that is something where it really is hugely beneficial to talk to a trained accessibility professional and have that audit work done.
Fantastic.
Focus yourself by just tabbing through a page on your site and look and see whether you know where you are. if there's visible focus there. If there's not, then you know you've got a problem.
If you can successfully use a web application or a website from the keyboard without using a mouse, that means you will have taken care of a lot of the underlying things, and then the additional remediation will be much easier. When you go in and you can't even get to an object, now you're in for some coding. So
I really like the theme of this, and I especially want to underline the point that, yes, humans have to do this. This is something that's very important. That's why accessibility software testers exist. It's a very important job too. Before moving on to the next point, Erin Bangor is going to be dropping in some of the links for the various different resources we've mentioned into the chat on LinkedIn Live. Also, please do, if you are an accessibility expert, please drop in some of your own links into there as well. I did want to give a shout out to Jack. I want to give a shout out to Julian. Thank you very much to both of you. I also saw Darren Bates. Good to see you again, Darren, and David as well too. So please let us know if you have any particular questions for the panelists right here. But I really do appreciate you dropping in comments into the chat. This next question is going to you, Kathy, and going back to that human element. Tell me, what a day in the life of you looks like. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis when you are looking at these websites or assessing companies for digital accessibility? What does that look like for you?
Well, as an accessibility professional, what I specialize in now is setting up programs with organizations, talking with them about where they are in this journey of accessibility. What do you have going for you at this time? Do you have a program in place at all? Do you have someone at your organization who's responsible for this, an ADA coordinator or an accessibility coordinator? Do you have staff that are trained, or do you have a training program in place? Do you have a policy? That's actually one of the very first steps, is figuring out what standards you're going to adhere to or try to adhere to, and putting that into policy so that your staff understand what's expected of them, and then getting some training in place. A governance structure is very important, meaning who is doing the testing, who is overseeing the program, and how do they, what authority in the organization handles the budgeting and making sure that there's enough resources behind this program to make it successful. Organizations want to come into compliance with the laws. Are you testing to make sure that you're tracking what you're doing? Are you keeping track of remediation efforts? Can you see your progress? There's a lot to it, and these are things that, as I talk about how I work with organizations to give them information about how to move forward, it takes people, it takes staff in the organization participating. Everyone who creates content is responsible for making their content accessible. So it's not just the coordinator, but it takes time to get people up to speed, and it takes meetings, lots of meetings, and hopefully there'll be some committees or some work groups that you can put together at your organization, depending how large your organization is. If it's a very large organization, like some of the big universities that Hiram and I have worked for, they will have work groups made up from all the different departments, so the liaison from each department. They'll have a steering committee that the accessibility coordinator can go to talk about the need for bringing in maybe a contractor to assess all the PDFs for them and do some remediation, or come in and do some training or develop specialized training. This is something I could talk about for the rest of the day. It's my passion, and I love it when people contact us and they say, "What do we need to do? Where do we start?" So it's terrific because there's a lot to do. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's a program that you work on, and you make steps towards progress, and you track and document what you're doing. So that's what my world is like. There are lots of different kinds of accessibility professionals. A lot of them. Some of them are just doing testing. Some are just doing training. But from my perspective, I can tell you what accessibility implementation looks like.
And Hiram and Erica, do your jobs
Hiram, Erica,
Oh no,
you guys
I have a follow on because Kathy and I work together, so I can do her part, she can do mine. You know how I liked, they said they always put the warning at the end of a spell, right? So now I'm going to give you the warning. For those of you that are new to accessibility and you're saying, you know what we're going to do? We're going to hire an accessibility coordinator. And this coordinator is going to review all the VPATs for everything we're going to purchase. They're going to train everybody in the organization. They're going to, you really need to stop and think that first person we add, what is it reasonable for them to accomplish? They need to be able to impart empathy in the company. They need to be able to hold people to the standards. They need to be a liaison. They need to be out there for your first person. They need to be out there promoting it. When so frequently we work with organizations, they hired a coordinator, they said, and it failed. And I go, why? And then they start telling me all the things they dumped on them. They had to test all 100 of our websites, and they had to do every VPAT that came in. It just simply wasn't attainable. So the day in the life of some accessibility professionals is less than what one would hope for. But for those of you that are new and you're thinking about that first position, you're thinking about that coordinated position, think about it almost from a liaison perspective. And Erica and Kathy, I'll kick that back to you.
Well, and I love what you said also, Kathy, about how that everyone who creates content is responsible for creating accessible content. And that bleeds a little bit into, my experience. I have, lately I've been working with a lot of smaller organizations where there might just be a few people and they might be relatively new to doing digital work. And there's a lot of training that goes into that. Like, what do you mean by content? And, what does it mean to have accessible content? And just familiarizing people with assistive technology. You might meet people who are really advanced and just need an extra little bit of support to finish something. Or you might meet people who are brand new and they get, I was talking to someone about tab navigation. And he was so really bright, brilliant in his field, but he just never encountered it before. And I started showing him, and he said, "Wait a minute, what is that tool that you've put on your computer that has that makes a little box around all these different buttons?" And I thought, oh, I need to back up and adjust what I'm explaining here to encompass, because this guy was amazing. I've never seen this before. Brilliant person, not working in a technical field at all, but had suddenly been saddled with website management in his role and needed that training. So I think a big part also of accessibility work is training and teaching people so that they're able to start with where they are in their role and be able to create that accessible content and manage those websites. So your accessibility coordinator has a hopefully more reasonable quantity of work. Training is huge.
Now, and Erica, I wanted to actually jump in right there because I remember you telling me on our phone call the other day that you had gone through like an entire, master's program or bachelor's program in school, and then you had found out about accessibility only as a small footnote. Could you tell that story again?
Yeah, so I used to be a teacher, and I got into user experience research, and I was doing the certificate program, and we had one half. Now, this was a while ago. Hopefully things are getting better. And there are wonderful organizations that are looking to get accessibility into higher education. Teach Access is one of them if you're interested more about teaching accessibility at the university level. Have to name drop them because they're doing wonderful work. But we had one half of one page in a textbook saying, well, accessibility is important in this combined UX design and research program. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I would have never heard about this before. And thinking back on it now, it was a PDF scanned textbook, and I'm sure it was not accessible at all. But I mentioned it to my professor. I said, this is really interesting. Is this something you can really get into? And how much focus can you do on this? As I was starting to find more accessibility adjacent things, and he said, oh, you can spend your whole career on that. And I would have never known about it. So I think that there really is I think it's important to realize that if you meet someone, I mean, we're all kind of coming from the field looking out, and we can get in our little accessible towers and say, oh, we're just looking at the latest thing. But for those of you who are thinking, I'm new to this, oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh, that was all of us at one point. And there is unfortunately a lack of places to start learning about this in a lot of industries. So, congratulations on that first step. And it's a great first step, and we're glad you're taking it. And no shame if you're just finding out about it today. We're glad you're here. And I think that, certainly Kathy, Hiram, I don't know you as well, but you seem very cool as well. I think that that's one of the things that this group, I'm looking around the group, these are people who are very supportive of the newbies here. So no shame. This is also a reminder, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Welcome to that first step, if today's your first step. So don't, keep in mind my half page in the textbook, and I'm thinking, wow, that's cool, so.
I appreciate you saying that, Erica, because I feel like so many people don't know where to get started with disability inclusion and accessibility because they feel overwhelmed by it. They feel intimidated. But I mean, as me and Aaron had pointed out before, is that if you have a genuine interest and you take proactive steps, even as an individual, you may be very small, single person within a very large company, but even if you start taking steps yourself to try to address these systems, or at least raise awareness about them, that's still steps that are positive and moving in the right direction too. So you have the power. I wanted to transition. By the way, we are about halfway through the webinar. Thank you, everybody that has been with us so far. Please do keep dropping comments into the chat and questions that do come up, and let me know. But I will point out that we actually had one panelist that was unfortunately not able to join us today. Ann Forrest is a she is a former economist, and she is we brought her in kind of as a subject matter expert, as a person with a disability, and what she experiences kind of within the digital accessibility site. So unfortunately, Anne was not able to join us, but I wanted to kind of give a shout out to her for really kind of helping us out in so many ways here. But also, I wanted to kind of ask, in regards to cognitive disabilities, what should we be aware of when it comes to digital accessibility? Because that's not something that I hear a lot about. And I'll go ahead and actually ping this one over to Erica as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something, as you said, we're learning more and more about this. As we learn more about different neurotypes and different learning disabilities, that information is coming to our digital side as well. So this is a work in progress. This is something that we're really starting to expand our knowledge here. But what we know so far is that a big part of cognitive accessibility has to do with the pacing of information and the way it's presented. So breaking down big sections of text into sections and subsections that are descriptive of what that content is. Descriptive link text instead of a lot of read more or here, tell people where that link is going. And that actually benefits people with many different disabilities. Make sure your buttons are labeled with a clear indication of what that button does. Have clear information in your footer for what do I do if I need help? How do I contact the organization? Multiple methods of contact are great. Kathy mentioned captions earlier for videos that can also support people with auditory processing disorders. So making sure that information is coming in at a reasonable pace. And there are different options for getting the information, whether that's through sound in the video or through captions to read the bottom of the video, things like that. Another big factor with cognitive accessibility has to do with stimulation, and that is kind of the quantity of attention that the website is trying to grab from you. And there's a lot of things like animation, bright colors, videos, things like that websites use because they want to keep us there, right? They want our attention. They want us to stay on there and buy things or watch advertisements. But that can really overload people with certain cognitive disabilities or different neurodivergencies. So it can be helpful to actually dial that back a little bit. This is not to say you can't use bright colors or have videos on your website, but just kind of think about, am I using them really efficiently, or am I just grabbing information across the whole page? You could use bright colors for alerts, places where you really do want to grab people's attention. Warning, we're closed today. Come back tomorrow. That's really important. Or if you want to use a video to talk about what your organization does, again, really important information. But give people the option to turn it on and off. Autoplay content where you get to a page and it just plays a song or plays a video can be really distracting. So make sure you're giving people an option to say, yes, I want to watch the video or hear the song, start it from there. And then just think about, could I dial back the brightness a bit on my website? Maybe get rid of that bright white, all the bright red, things like that. And remove extra animations. It's okay to have a little bit of like, for example, on a toggle button, it's going to move, the color is going to change. But if you have for example, a big autoplay video is your background where there's a lot of motion, or scrolling images with no control, that can be a lot. That can demand a lot of cognition from your users. And as we're learning more about cognitive accessibility and what our cognition really looks like as we're using technology, this is really a place where we're starting to realize that all of us are dealing with a lot of stimulation, and all of us are dealing with more and more, as we're increasingly digital, more and more demands on our brains. So having a brain-friendly website is really going to help people get a solid, quick, accurate impression of who you are. If they have a screaming baby and a phone call coming through and they're preoccupied because they know they need to schedule a meeting and they're trying to look at your website and get information, having a clear, easy to comprehend layout is going to really help you support those customers too. Even if they don't have a disability, they're still experiencing a lot of cognitive load. So this is something that can really reach very far across your entire customer base.
I love that. We're all busy people. We've got a lot of distractions. There's a lot of noise out there in the world. And so we have to figure out, and I think too, just like from a general marketing standpoint, it may be tempting to have all these flashy colors and videos that autoplay and things like that. But if you are doing that, you might be distracting from the message. And ultimately, people kind of want you to get to the point, and they kind of want to be able to access your content faster too. So thank you. That's very insightful. And Kathy, I wanted to ping it back to you real quick, because you had mentioned how, hey, a lot of times, like, you may just have one person that's doing all this stuff. So what can other people within an organization do? I know, for example, that I can add alt text to like an image, but what is that and how do I do that? Like, let's start with like
Right.
LinkedIn. If I'm posting to social media, because a lot of us may think, oh, this is completely something that's outside of me and something that I don't engage with at all, but you do. And the classic example is you might post to LinkedIn for your social media representing your company. So what can people do realistically? And let's start with just alt text images for example.
There are a lot of things that folks can do, but because we're talking about technology, they may need some training. And it may be specialized training or it may be something they can find online, but they're going to need help. I recommend that the first thing that they do within their organization is find out if there is an ADA coordinator. If there is, that person's going to know a little more about accessibility and perhaps be able to help you with resources that they've already identified. As far as how you can make your own content accessible, I would say that there are some tools that are built into software, and you just have to look for it. If you're making a Word document, for example, Word has an accessibility checker that you can run on your document, and it'll prompt you to add some accessibility to the document. We talked about the Wave tool for HTML for web pages. So if you're a web designer, that's a place to start to begin to understand when you see that report after testing a website. Oh, it's telling me I need to put headings, or it's telling me my heading structure is not succinct. It's not in the right order. It's telling me that there's no form control. So you can learn a lot just from using the free tool. Also, Acrobat has an accessibility tester for your PDF. So those are a few things. I would say that when I learned web accessibility, I went back to school at 46 and learned web development. And it was a class where I learned accessible web development. It was a very unusual situation because it's difficult to find, as Erica mentioned, accessibility training in colleges. But I learned so much, not just on the job, but by volunteering with a nonprofit in Austin. And that's where I met Hiram. That's when we began to do a lot of work together as volunteers and trainers. And then my career just exploded from there. So I would say look for information, look for groups that are in your area. Go ahead and search for accessibility online and see what you can find in your area, or resources that are there online that you can tap into.
But let's get back to the prompt was, what is the ADA required? Because this is a very fascinating topic. You have to realize that disabilities are not permanent. Some of them are temporary. My daughter incurred a head injury when she was in school and needed accommodations. COVID hit our workplace, and we had people that had reduced cognition for an extended period of time. What the ADA requires you to do is be flexible in your policies and procedures. And we could go into great detail. This gets back to what Erin was saying. This almost faces inside the organization as much as it does outside the organizations. So some of the things that we had to adopt, because we had a person that had, I'll call it brain fog, that's what we called it, brain fog from COVID. It's very individualized. There's no recipe. Activities will take longer. You'll have you can have light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. After the injury, they may be restricted from using the computer for an extended period of time. They may ask to work from home. They may ask for productivity products like password managers or Kurzweil, which is a system that helps read and understand that. So, the ADA is a big, hairy law, but you need to understand that it requires you to be flexible with your employees and that you make reasonable accommodations. And your employees are your most expensive resource. You spend a lot of money hiring them. You spend a lot of money training them. You don't want them to go away. There are permanent issues like traumatic brain injury, and that will just never, some forms never go away, and dyslexia and ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, development disabilities, and English as a second language. All those fall into that cognitive realm. But just flexibility, and then we could spend the next 2 hours on the ADA. But I just wanted to slip that in because I like the ADA.
No, I appreciate that. And I feel like a lot of times too, I feel like businesses have the right intention, but sometimes they just like get things wrong about accessibility. So Hiram, could you kind of elaborate on that? Like, what would you tell a business to kind of help guide their efforts a little bit? What would you tell them?
So what do businesses get right and wrong on accessibility? Right now, if you go out and you do a Google search, how do I start an online business? It's going to talk about taxes. It's going to talk about selecting a platform. It is going to tell you everything you need to know except accessibility. So some of the things, that's one of the things you get wrong right away. But some of the things that well-meaning businesses get wrong is on the procurement side. I can't tell you how many times we've done an audit and they said, well, we're doing this development of this product. We want you to audit it. This is what we developed. I go, great. And they go, oh, but don't worry about doing the grid. We bought that. And don't worry about doing the chat feature. Don't worry about doing the help system because we bought all those. And I'm like, well, when you purchased them, did you ask about accessibility before you stuck them in your product? And they're like, no, because they're not our tools. When you bring things in and you make it part of your environment, they're yours. You're now responsible. So procurement is definitely one of those huge things that people get wrong. And I hope I'm answering the right question, Miles, because I'll answer the question I want to answer, not necessarily the one you said. Another thing that businesses are not getting right are overlays. It's very controversial, but there was a recent study that came out, and 25% or 24.5% of the lawsuits against websites using accessibility had overlay widgets. When you use an overlay, what you're saying is our developers are not sufficient enough that they can code accessibly. And I need to make it very clear. The standards, we have standards. We have HTML, we have ARIA, we have all the standards, we have all the guidelines that we need. Have the web content accessibility guidelines. When you use an overlay and you say, this is what all we can do, what you're saying is, we're not even going to attempt to fix our websites. We're not going to attempt to make our products. We're looking for the easy button. And that's an empathy thing. But that's one of the things. Be careful when you employ overlays thinking that this is the magic button. Doing it.
And just a follow-up question to that, Hiram, like how do you gauge companies and that they have a fairly mature accessibility program? Like what does that typically look like when you're seeing it?
Oh, all right. Everybody get comfortable.
Yeah.
So, all right. Rather than give you anecdotal evidence, I'm going to start talking about ways that you can judge the maturity of an organization. There are maturity models like the policy-driven. I'm dropping things that they'll transfer to chat. Policy-driven adoption for accessibility. What this is, it's a maturity model, and it asks you questions. On your policies, what do you have worked out? On your procedures, do you have development figured out? Do you have procurement figured out? Are you ensuring the relevant accessibility skills are assigned to job training? And so I'm going to drop some links in the chat window that actually show up there. I think I got them in there. And so this is something that the Department of Information Resources uses to vet any vendor that is going to do application development work for them. And so it's great because if you say, I'm going to hire you to make me a website. Well, how do I know Miles is going to make a website? So they make you fill out this maturity model and then they evaluate you. So for the people on this call, you can take this and you can answer the question. Now there's other ones that like higher education uses. The Vendor Accessibility Development Services One of the other things on the DIR side is the vendor accessibility development information resources. I can't get it right. It's called VADSR. I never say it. I never spell it. The VADSR is in addition to the PDAA. And what it does is it will ask you questions like, what are your key business process? Describe your skills and resources in the organization to develop and produce ICT. Describe your organization corrective action process. So where the PDAA is very detailed and very nuts and bolts, this one asks high level questions. Mm-hmm. Then the last one, and I promise I'll slow down here, is the Higher Education Community Vendor Assessment Toolkit, or the HECVAT. The HECVAT is a tool actually that's used for security in higher education. Before you bring a package into higher education, you have to fill this out. And they added an accessibility section. So if you go in there, it'll ask, what are your policies like? Has this been tested by a third party? So, I just dumped a tremendous amount of stuff on you. But if you want to know, how does my organization stack up? How is my accessibility program doing? If you'll take the time to go through these questions, you will have a very good understanding of where your gap is. And I'll give you a big one. Do you have a feedback mechanism for constantly monitoring improvement? That's the highest level of maturity, right? We have a process, it's working, but we're always getting feedback and cycling it in. So I know I always got one on everybody because that's a hard one to get to. So those are some resources that I really believe in, and if you take time to look at them, it will be well worth your time.
If I can jump in,
thank you very much.
Those are excellent resources, and we've used them, right, Hiram?
Mm-hmm.
Organizations are using them, and they work. Just for a quick takeaway, I will mention to you, Lainey Feingold, mm-hmm. right? She's an attorney who works in accessibility negotiating lawsuits, and she will tell you that one of the most important things you can do, I'll give you a few of the most important things you can do to satisfy the Department of Justice if they come after you, and that is have a policy, mm-hmm. have accessibility information easily found on your website, like a link in the footer, so that the public can go there to get information or get help if they need it. To have a coordinator, have someone that's identified as your accessibility coordinator that's overseeing the program. And then all the things that Hiram said about integrating accessibility into the processes. But those things are the real high level. That's what the DOJ is looking for. Do you have a policy? Do you have somebody that's in charge of it? Do you have customer information on the web? Do you have training in place for your staff? If you can do some of those things, then hopefully you can avoid you just lower your risk. Let me say it that way.
Love it. Well, and Kathy, this next question is for you. I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room because we know that everybody's thinking it. We know that everybody's talking about it. Yeah. How about artificial intelligence? Like, how is that affecting accessibility? Like, what does the future look like? And by the way, spoiler alert, yes, you cannot replace humans with AI to do your accessibility. We kind of touched on that, but it doesn't matter how smart the computers are, they can't do everything for you. But how is AI affecting the accessibility landscape?
Well, let's talk about what AI can do. I mean, it's pretty exciting where we're going in the future. I think some of the things that we're going to see, and I learned a lot of this at South by Southwest this year, listening to Amy Webb. She's a futurist. Her organization just tracks information, electronic information, data, economic, bio, and they look at the convergence of all of these topics and where we're going with artificial intelligence. And I heard her say some fascinating things. That she talked about how artificial intelligence will become ubiquitous because it's in our home. I mean, we all have the Nest, we have Alexa, we have all these products already, and they're gathering information from us because we talk to them, they're listening to us even when we're not talking to them. And we're developing a relationship with this artificial intelligence. And if you're a person with a disability, it can be very helpful to you because the AI can be used as an aid. It can do things for you. It can handle controls. It can operate controls of other devices and mechanisms for you. There's, of course, the speech recognition. For people who have a speech issue, the AI learns their speech. It learns how they talk and understands them, which is terrific. It's, of course, voice activated. It really will allow people to have greater independence and a higher quality of life. I know that Hiram's been playing around with Chat GPT and some other things, and I'd like for him to talk about how he's used it and what he's seen. But I think the future is here. You know, I don't think it's out there. I think it's here now.
Thanks, Kathy. And actually, it took me a long time to wrap my head around it because I thought, like everybody, that, AI is going to help us do testing. And Kathy actually said it. AI is code up. It lives in the box. It looks at the code. It comes up. It doesn't have eyeballs from the outside. It cannot test in the same way that a person with a disability can. I've seen some tools where, as a person is testing and moving through, AI is watching their interactions and asking things like, hey, I see you're on a button. If you click it, does it do something? But it is not able to do that. But now here's where AI does get exciting. The accessibility coordinator's job is to impart empathy. It's the why. We need more mentors. And I am seeing AI come in a mentoring role. So when I code and I'm like, I need to create a page that does this, it will do it. It's amazing. And you say, well, what happens if it gets delusional and it comes up with a weird answer? I say, apparently you've never worked with a mentor before. But aside from that, you have to understand how to ask a question. So it gives you something. You need to ask, is this accessible? Can you improve the accessibility? But these are the things that I've seen that I'm particularly excited about it. You can give it a role. You can ask it a question. You can say, I'm a project manager. I'm a developer. I'm a person that doesn't have any legal background. What is this saying? And so you give it a role. It can do it. It can do experience level. I am new to accessibility. And so when you say, what is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? It gives you this short answer. You say, I'm new to accessibility. What is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? It really spins things out. So this mentoring role, this body doubling, where it sits next to you and it's actually assisting you, is really fantastic. And you can do GitHub Copilot and some other things. Now, the one I'm really excited about, and I'm so sad Anna's not here. I think cognitive is gonna be the sweet spot for AI. I took a very complicated posting about accessibility, and I put it into AI, and so I was like, rather than I asked it summary questions like, what is this saying? And this article included one section that says, the judge dismissed with prejudice a website accessibility complaint. Well, with prejudice, what does that mean? And so I said, okay, can you explain this to me? And so ChatGPT came back and said, yeah, sure I can. So it summarized the article, and this time it says the judge dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled on the same grounds. But it was still a little long. So I said, can you write this for a person who has no understanding of what accessibility is? And it wrote a very good thing. And I said, well, that's good, but can you just write me a bulleted list of what this article is saying? And it did a very good job. Now, do you have to vet what's being said to you? Absolutely. But you need to vet what I'm saying to you also, I really believe that cognitive is going to really accelerate with AI. I believe people's productivity, it's going to take a little tiny burden off some of the accessibility coordinators by being able to be there and give information. So I am very excited from the code up perspective. Now, what Kathy said, which is very powerful, and what Amy Webb, I think his name, said was AI is now being extended to sensors outside of itself. And so now, if AI ever gets outside of the box, somebody takes a camera, aims it at the computer screen, and gives it access to the keyboard and says, I want you to test as a person that has a mobility challenge and it's not using a mouse, and it goes through. I think that is possible. I think that is coming, but it can't do it with a current in living inside the box architecture. Right now, the best accessibility testing tools allegedly can catch up to 80% of the errors. How can anything else inside the box do better than that?
So what I'm hearing you saying is that, it is a labor enhancer, not a labor replacer.
Absolutely. Nobody's losing their job on the coding side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these tools are going to take some time to get trained. They're going to take, and they're going to make us better at our work. But, I would not look at this as an excuse to get rid of your accessibility people, because they're still doing an incredibly important job. But it's the same potential, when Photoshop first came out, to be able to enhance the abilities of graphic designers to work more efficiently. Almost to me, that's kind of what it signals, is a really enhancement to so many of our roles. And that's not just accessibility testers, but any person's job too, an enhancement to their work, and so that they can really get better at it too. And I personally have coworkers that have dyslexia, and they use AI pretty regularly. And in fact, it's built into a lot of our email systems to help them write an email, so that something that would normally take them an hour or 30, 40 minutes to create, a well-structured professional email, they can put it out, and it writes it reasonably well. They check for corrections and stuff, and it makes them feel like they're much more professional in how they present themselves too, and saves some time so they can focus on other things that they're better at as well.
And we're kind of familiar with it. Grammarly is now somewhat being AI driven, but I use Grammarly all the time. My first draft of anything is not legible, but so if it wasn't for Grammarly, you would get very little from me. So. And I have used ChatGPT. I go, you know what? Here are my thoughts. Can you just put this in a sentence? I'm like, okay, not perfect, but hey, you just put me 10 minutes down the road, So I call it body doubling, is a concept where you have two people do the same task and they're working on it together. And I almost use ChatGPT to body double, because now I'm able to, because I can't really ask Grammarly questions, but I can ask ChatGPT questions like, is that clear? What if I was writing this for an audience that had no accessibility background? Or how about if I was writing it for an audience that had a lot of accessibility understanding, and let it, it's really quite helpful.
Yeah, and if you're reviewing scientific information or legal documents, and you put it into ChatGPT and ask it to just summarize it for you, give you a bulleted list of the high points, you'll at least know what's in the document without reading the whole thing. So you can really save some time there and get an understanding.
Love it. Well, very good. And Hiram, I want you to touch briefly on the purchasing side. So the platform that we're using right now is Riverside. And one of the challenges that I encountered actually is I was going through when I was picking out a streaming service that could be able to go straight to LinkedIn Live. And I was like, great, it generates transcriptions and stuff automatically for me. Okay, wonderful. That's fantastic. But what I didn't catch was that it was not able to generate live closed captions on the fly and push that out to LinkedIn Live. And LinkedIn Live, unfortunately, wasn't able to do it as well, too. So I go back to the purchasing thing, because I feel bad that, I made that decision, that I, sprung for a product and stuff and didn't realize the full implications of that. But talk to me a little bit more, like buyers and sellers, what do they have to know, from the purchasing process, and how do you look around those corners?
So Kathy, it is like throwing gasoline on an open flame, because I love purchasing.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a policy wonk. First thing you have to do is to go back to Kathy. In your policies and procedures, you should have a purchasing policy. policy. The purchasing policy should cover two things. Should cover products and services. On the product side, or for products and services, what we're looking for is credible evidence as to the degree of accessibility that a product contains. So on the product side, there is a thing called a voluntary product accessibility template. And Miles, had you found one for this and you brought it down, there is a WCAG success criteria that specifically says, is there live captions? And it would have said, no, we are not compliant, and you would have been able to catch it if it was filled out, if it was correctly. I mean, there's several places in a VPAT that you can do that. So the first thing we learned is for products, there are credible evidence, like things like a voluntary product accessibility template. It describes accessibility. It's hard to read. It's miserable to read, but it can give you a clue. What a VPAT is designed to do is set up a structured conversation between a purchaser and a vendor. And so for the product side, that's it. For the service side, I told it to you earlier. That's where you get the policy-driven adoption for accessibility, because services are like, I'm hiring somebody to create a website. How do I know that they're going to do that? You can create your own survey. I gave you all those tools. You take those tools, you can pick your own questions out, and when you're hiring somebody, make them answer it. How do you test for accessibility? What stages of the development process do you test for accessibility? And let them answer those questions. So, and then the last one that you must absolutely do in your terms and conditions, when you were just buying something off the shelf, you don't get to really modify terms and conditions and things like that. But if it is a contract, if it is a procurement, your terms and conditions should specify your minimum level of accessibility and what happens if the product doesn't meet that level of accessibility. So you may say, in our organization, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA is required. And then hopefully in your terms and conditions, it says generically, if there is an accessibility defect, we expect you to remediate it in a certain amount of time. So terms and conditions in a contract are your last line of defense. You had an issue. You met with the vendor did not fix the issue. We are now into the bad side of purchasing. And that's where, and I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with that did not have accessibility written into their contract. And when they came back, you are stuck with $100,000 piece of software that's not going to work for you. And that's when you get to learn words like corrective action plan and equally effective alternative access plan, which I can see Kathy salivating because she wants to talk about it. So, on the purchasing side, you should have, you need to look for products. You should have a policy. It should address products. It should address services. You need to know what credible evidence is. You need to know how to collect it, analyze it, review it, and then your contract needs to have a fail-safe in case all that goes south. All right, Kathy, I'll stop.
I just want to add on that sometimes people with all the best intentions go down the wrong road. And that means you might be working with a salesperson from an organization that's going to build a website for you or a web application for you, and you really like these people and you like the stuff that they have online, and they're totally willing to make it accessible for you, and they plan to do that. But if you haven't done your homework to find out whether or not they know what that actually means, they may think that they can build the thing and then add the accessibility on, and it won't work. I've been through that more than once. It's not only painful, it's expensive. The organization ends up spending a lot of time trying to repair the damage when it should have just been built correctly the first time. So you have to do your homework, like Hiram said, and make sure that these people can give you the credible evidence that they've done this before and they know what they're doing and they can prove it to you.
And so get your Erica and have her help you craft a survey, because she has wonderful questions that can go into a survey. And we worked with organizations. I don't care if you're buying a product or a service, you have to answer this survey. And that's what the HECVAT was and the PDA was and some of those other things. But you can create a custom survey that's not a heavy lift, and you can send it out. And it's easy, and you do it on every solicitation.
Yeah.
That's a 2-minute version of an 8-hour course.
That's good. No, I appreciate it. And, again, it's something that like, I feel like I need to be better about thinking about that as I go and pick these, and we all can be better about that. We can all, and, I think it's also important too, that when you do notice something that is inaccessible, you provide that feedback to the vendor directly so that they know that it's a problem and that it matters to you too. You say, hey, look, this is something. And I told the streaming platform too, I was like, hey, this is a miss. And, I want to see it changed, and I probably will take my business elsewhere unless I do see that change that's implemented fairly soon. Use the power of your dollar. You vote with your dollar, and make sure that they know that they are aware that is something that they would be losing business on. But Erica, I'm going to have you kind of sum it all up for us here. We've had a lot of conversations, a lot of wide-ranging conversations, everything from AI to accessibility to alt text to like what's the business benefits, so many different things. But I guess the basic thing, if nobody is listening to anything except what you say right now, how would you recommend an organization just get started with accessibility? How do they just get started?
Well, I would call Kathy and hire them. But I mean,
well, we wouldn't say call you, but continue.
I mean, call me too. But but I think it's really important, and I just had a few little 3-step process here, maybe 4, for starting to structure your approach. First of all, and Kathy touched on this earlier, figure out where accessibility is going to live in your organization. Who is the person who's in charge? Who is involved? Or, a large organization might have people liaising from different departments, developers, product designers. If you're a solopreneur or a small business, it might just be figuring out, this is me carving out some time to work on this, and I'm going to commit to it every week. So how does that look? And then second, once you figure out where things are going to go, that you have a sustainable place for accessibility to live, pick a starting point. I think one mistake that people make is that they want to make their whole system accessible right away. And especially if you're a small organization, you really need to pick a first project and start with that. Now, if you have a large team, or if you have several coordinators working with you, then you can take on bigger things sooner. But look at what's manageable for you. That just might be, for example, I was talking to a small business owner. They want to start with their social media. That's a great place for them to start because they do a lot of their sales over social media. Mm-hmm. And with that, that's where they do a lot of their sales. Think about where you can put that first project to have the best impact. Is it social media? Is it your blog? Is it a podcast where you need to add transcripts? Think about where people are really interacting with you in a big way. Maybe you get a little bit of website traffic, but maybe you get a lot of people on your YouTube channel. Think about where people are going. Or if you have an online purchase process, that's really important because that's how people are actually buying your product. So think about impact. And then last but not least, document. If you have a good resource that you want to start using across all the content creators in your company, make sure that resource is in a place where they can get it. Make sure that they know they can ask questions about using that resource to the accessibility lead or the coordinator. Keep track of lessons you've learned. Maybe you started using a product and you said, oh, this is not accessible. Make sure that your procurement department knows that happens. So as people leave and new people come in, that you had a problem with that product and you need to see some changes before you can use it again. keep track of design decisions that you make for accessibility. If you get rid of that really thin text, that poor contrast text, you start using, a better font with better color contrast, make a style guide, make an accessible style guide, say this is accessible, it meets this criteria, and then make sure that your web designer has that. And also, if you document, it helps you avoid reinventing the wheel, because you don't have to go back and refix problems that you already had a fix for. So, sustainable place to live. You need the right people in charge. Make sure that everyone knows who those people are, that they can ask questions to those people. Pick a manageable place to start that works for the size of your company and team. Use engagement patterns to help you find that starting place, and then keep track of what you're doing, and leave good information in the right place where people can find it.
I love it. So many useful tidbits right there. So many actionable things that any of us can really take on. We are over time, so we got to wrap this up right here. But I wanted to give a quick shout out to Jack, to Julian, to Darren, to a couple other folks. Thank you so much for engaging with our chat. David as well, appreciate you. So thank you all for sharing your knowledge, and I hope that this was useful for you from a networking perspective and sharing knowledge perspective. And Aaron, you want to bring us home and wrap us all up?
Yeah, I loved how Erica wrapped us up there with some tangible actions. One more action I will encourage people to do is get involved with Disability In. That can be at the national level. As I mentioned, there are 25 plus local affiliates around the country. And then if you are in the Central Texas area, get involved with us. Nobody has all the answers, but collectively we have a lot. And so if you're just getting started and wondering where to start, how to do it, the best way is to learn from other organizations of different sizes and different fields that have gone through that journey already. And if you are farther along in your accessibility and disability inclusion journey, you probably realize how much further you still have to go, learning from other organizations who've tried things and they've worked. You can go ahead and brag to us about that, because it's not bragging if you've done it, right? But also sharing the things that haven't worked, and maybe so everybody else can kind of learn from that and get smarter faster. So please go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe, as Miles said at the top here, with our page. But more importantly, feel free to reach out to Miles, myself, about how to get involved with Disability In, because it's not a top-down organization. It's an organization of members helping each other. Right? It's very much a peer-to-peer place to get involved and knowing where to go and what to do. So I'll encourage you, if you, no matter where you are in the disability inclusion journey, whether that's related to digital accessibility or procurement and supply chain or customer service or hiring and retention, whatever it happens to be, we've got members that can kind of help you along that journey. So with that, thank you. I saw it looked like we had almost 100 folks join in today. Thank you for everyone that joined. And one last thank you to Hiram, Kathy, and Erica. And also to make sure to say thanks to Ann she did all the prep. She just missed all the fun part here together. But thank you all to our panelists and to Miles for moderating such a great session. Next month, we will be here doing an in-person meetup. So please come out and put some real life faces to names. And we're going to get together. Miles, do you have that handy on what we're going to be talking about, or we'll post that too?
We'll talk about it. That's next month. I haven't thought that far ahead.
No. So we will be sure to post that to our LinkedIn page. So if you want to find out what we're going to talk about, be sure to check that out. You'll be the first time. So with that, thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 1 month here in person, and 2 months back online here on LinkedIn Live.
All right. Take care, y'all. Bye.